Okay, let's start. This is the Gardener community meeting. And today we have one topic from Johannes about cert-manager in the garden setup. Do you have any other topics to discuss today? We have vacation season here in Germany, so we don't have so many attendees today. If not, then Johannes, you can take over.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I wanted to tell you about the cert-manager and the garden setup. One moment, I'm sharing my screen. Whoops. Yeah, okay. We implemented a cert-manager component for the garden setup, so the gardener installer, which will soon be available. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit how it works and how it is built up. So as you can see, the cert-manager component are actually 3 components. The first one is the actual cert-manager. The second one is a small connector. So if you request a certificate using a cert-manager from, let's say, Let's Encrypt, you have to validate that the domain you request the certificate for is actually yours. And one possibility to do so is the DNS-01 challenge, where you have to set a TXT record on that domain to prove ownership. And well, cert-manager can set that automatically for quite a variety of DNS providers. For example, for Route 53, there's a cert-manager plugin that can do that. However, since we already have a DNS controller in the setup, we wanted to use that to set the TXT records. So this component actually connects the cert-manager to our DNS controller. So the cert-manager gets the key from Let's Encrypt that should be put in the TXT record, and the solver sets it. I will tell you more about that in a few seconds. And the last component basically actually requests the certificate. We need the certificate for the dashboard ingress, so that you don't get a browser warning when heading to the dashboard URL. So how does that solver work? One moment. Yeah, so I tried to make a small chart. It's actually quite a new feature of the cert-manager. That's called a kind of webhook issuer. So you can create a special issuer that when a certificate gets requested, sends a post request to yeah, they call it webhook. It's actually not a webhook because you can't apply ABAC rules to webhook, so it's a small API extension. But anyways, it gets a post request and then can extract the information out of there. So the flow starts here when the user creates a certificate resource. A cert-manager watches that, creates an order and challenge resources, which are not interesting right now. Sends the challenge payload to our connector. It's this component. The connector extracts the information what TXT record should be set. So what's the domain and what should be the content, and then creates a DNS entry resource, CRD of our DNS controller manager. And it will get picked up by the controller manager, which then creates the TXT record, which at the end will be verified by the Acme server. So let's encrypt. The flow is similar when once the URL has been validated. The cert-manager will send another post request, which basically says that the TXT record can be destroyed again, and our connector will destroy the DNS entry, which will cause the DNS controller manager to destroy the TXT record again. So that's basically the layout of this solver component. And yeah, how does it look like in the actual configuration part? So you have two possibilities to set that up. This is the acre YAML file from the Garden setup, so the main configuration file. Your first option is you don't change anything. So this is a YAML file that would have worked with the previous version too. And if you don't add anything, this will happen. So you will get a gardener, and the certificate will be signed by something called self-signed CA. It's basically a CA we created. It's self-signed, therefore untrusted. And you have, if you ignore this warning, you will get to the dashboard. However, you can also add a cert-manager node in the acre YAML, which looks something like this. There are basically two options you can configure. One is an email address. If you use an Acme server, for example, Let's Encrypt, you need an email address for registration. If you don't provide it here, the first one from here will be taken. If you don't want that, you can override it at this point. The second point is the server. That's basically the Acme server to use. You can actually enter a URL of any Acme server here. At least it should work. But there are also some shortcuts. There are three important ones. Live will connect to the Let's Encrypt live server, so you will get trusted certificates. Let me show you that one. Yeah, then looks like this. So Let's Encrypt authority. It's trusted. However, during development, you should take care that the live server from Let's Encrypt has quite strict rate limits. So for testing purposes, you may want to put something else there. So the other two shortcut options are basically staging. Staging will use the Let's Encrypt staging server. The staging server has way less restrictive rate limits, significantly. So you can test using the staging server, and but it won't produce trusted certificates. They will still be untrusted. So that you can use this option if you want to test whether the communication with Let's Encrypt works, or but the certificates won't be trusted. The last option is self-signed, which is exactly what happens if you enter nothing. So it's the default and will create untrusted certificates. What does happen in the cluster? So if you see the pods, we have three cert-manager pods here. This is the actual cert-manager deployment. This is the case for self-signed certificates. So if you use self-signed certificates, the solver component doesn't get deployed because it's not needed. If you never have to actually set a TXT record, it's would just be useless. Strictly speaking, we could also remove the cert-manager in that case, because if you have your CA self-signed, you can also sign certificates with it directly. But we decided to still deploy the cert-manager to make use of its auto-renewal feature for the certificates. So we have an issue here. In this case, it's what cert-manager calls a CA issuer. So you provide it with a CA certificate. This is the self-signed one. And then if you order certificate resources, it will sign the certificate, in this case, this one, with this CA you provided it with. In the other case, with the setting set to live, there will be another pod running. This one. This is our solver component. And if I can show you the logs. As you can see, when I set up the cluster, it received an ACME challenge to set a DNS entry for this address, with this, which is exactly the address where the TXT record needs to be to validate my ingress domain I requested the certificate for. And well, then DNS entry record got created, and once the ownership of the domain was validated, it received another call to clean up the DNS entry resource again. So I can't show that one, it's gone. And the issue looks something like this. It's what cert-manager calls an ACME issuer. And this webhook configuration, as I said, it's quite new. It's in cert-manager since release 0.8.0. And you have some things to configure here. The DNS class, our DNS controller manager has a DNS class if you deploy several instances of it in one cluster, so they don't compete over the DNS entry resources. So this is basically the created DNS entry will have this as an annotation or label. So if you have multiple instances of the DNS controller, the correct one reacts to it. Namespace, here you can set the namespace in which the DNS entry should be created. If you don't set it, it will be created in the same namespace as the issuer. But in our case, the DNS controller is configured to only pick up DNS entries in the kube system namespace, so I need to put that there. Yeah, and these are these belong to the template of the webhook, and basically make sure that cert-manager sends the post request to the correct address. Yeah, I think that's basically it. As I said before, the cert-manager component is not yet available, but it will be probably next week. It's nearly finished, and then you just have to add this to your ACRE YAML to get a valid certificate for your dashboard.
Thanks, Johannes. Are there any questions? Comments? Seems not to be the case. Then thank you, Johannes, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.